Participants of this conference all represent at least one field of science, although in those days everything is interdisciplinary, you know. So one of the main themes of this conference is very relevant here: interdisciplinary communication and conversation. So I would like to join this conversation and the communication with my paper with a specific focus on the evaluation of scientific performance, because one day or another we are all evaluated. And are we satisfied with these measurements and the methods of those evaluations? So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished colleagues, dear friends, the title of my presentation is How Publish or Perish Can Become Publish and Perish in the Age of Objective Assessment of Scientific Quality. The point I wish to make is not that we all know that the methods to assess the quality of research achievement are controversial. I do not wish to call into question the residue of scientometric approach, its methodology, or its particular indicators either. Many have called and keep calling attention to the rigid and uniform application of the numerical approach of counting publications, arguing that it is doing injustice to the certain areas of science. With that, a starting point, this study is intended to serve two purposes. One, I wish to call attention to how extremely harmful the present scientometric practice may be for many scholars and scientists. And secondly, I propose to demonstrate how the crucial contradiction in question at the core of the present practice follows from the myths generated by scientometric itself. And here is the paradox. It is the mechanical application and overvaluation of the scientometric assessment of research performance, the very objectivity designed to guarantee equal and fair treatment, that does, in fact, lead to the devaluation of quality research effort and discourages, even kills the will to conduct research in several disciplines. That is to say, the partly to, part fun proverbial publish or perish principle, which urges the recent scientist or academic to keep publishing for the sake of career advancement and academic survival, turns into the trap of what we can describe as publish and perish. How a well-intentioned and basically most welcome development, scientometry, or rather its method of application, as well as the myths it generated, yield to the publish and perish phenomenon is the subject I will address below. In this presentation, I have no time to speak about the history of the scientometric and the situation in the Hungary. You will find some details in the printed version of my presentation. As for scientometry, very briefly, most significant from our point of view was the moment when Eugene Garfield devised the notion of impact factor. It sounds familiar for you? Impact factor. At present, journal impact factors calculation are based on the citation database services of the Thomson Institute for Scientific Information. The list of journal citation reports published annually in the supplementary volume to Science Citation Index carry the impact factors of the journals indexed by ISI. The lists are available on the internet on a strictly subscriptions basis. In sum, individuals do not and cannot have impact factors. Only journals can and do. A highly relevant document in our context is the Declaration of the American Society of Cell Biology, appeared in 2012, entitled San Francisco Declaration of Research Assessment, and pointed out that the journal impact factor approach has its deficiencies and should not be used for the quality assessments of scientific research. They declare, quote, "The journal impact factor was originally created as a tool to help librarians identify journals to purchase and not a measure of the scientific quality of research in an article. The declaration also offers recommendations which are in agreement with the recommendations of the Academia Europaea, quote, "The current bibliometric systems are not generally applicable. They are used for large multidisciplinary organizations such as universities is therefore inadequate. Several disciplines such as engineering, mathematics, most of the social sciences and humanities work with other publication cultures because of the different character of their societal mission, forum, and target groups." The present state of the affairs. What prompts us in the world of science, then, too, is to urge to survive, the need to compete with ourselves and others. If you publish more, you will be stronger in numbers. You will have higher scientometric indicators. But do indicators, figures, really tell us anything about the scientific quality of research performance? It is not scientific quality that should matter. As I know the present situation relatively well in my own country only, the state of affairs in Hungary will be my basic point of departure. The general view in Hungary, and not only in Hungary, of course, is that many publications, as well as a high number of citations of those works in the literature, make the successful and recognized scientists. They guarantee scientific eminence. Moreover, doctoral schools, schools of habilitations, and scientific committees of the academy take journal impact factor into consideration more and more. In recent years, the only officially acceptable list of publication can be the one generated in the Academy of MTMT system, the publication database of the Academy. And it is the only list of publications you can attach to doctoral habilitation or Doctor of the Academy application. In Hungarian higher education, each of the appointments require their degree of title. Assistant professor, PhD is required. Associate professor, habilitation is required. And full professor, the title of Doctor of the Academy is required. What is more, publishing in high impact factor journals is often an expectation to be fulfilled for a PhD degree too. In pedagogy, at my University of Debrecen, for example, doctoral candidates must produce at least 5 articles published in high quality national and international journals and or refereed books before they are allowed to defend their dissertation. Closely related to our topic is that Q ranking, a Scopus database related Scimago journal rank, is also gaining momentum. And some sentences about the Hungarian Academy of Sciences. To maintain and operate the MTMT is the responsibility of the Academy as regulated by the Academy law. It was clearly conceived with the intention to create a multi-purpose, nationally uniform publication database in which every scientist has his or her datasheet and can handle his or her research performance on a uniform surface. In 2015, Péter Sasvári and András Nemeslaki conducted an empirical survey of what this all looks like as practice in the economics and law section of the Academy. Availability, meshing with international ranking lists, and actual publication output were studied. The results highlighted the serious problem that it is barely 2/3 of the international journals indexed by Scopus and Web of Science in which our social scientists publish. Another profound problem is that social scientists published in their national language more frequently, which means the lack of internationalization of the field. The general tables of MTMT distinguished 4 main types rated as scientific: journals, books, books chapters, conference proceedings in journals, or conference volumes. Everything else qualifies as a non-scientific publication. A cross-disciplinary anomaly presents itself here too, since one book counts as one publication, just as any other scientific genre, like a journal article does. It is known to all that there are disciplines in the humanities and social sciences where the most highly valued and generally expected form of research performance is not a journal article, but a monograph study. And producing a book and preparing it for publication is immensely more time-consuming than publishing an article. It goes without saying that the time pre-writing research takes can widely vary in both cases. Add to that the indexing practice of the huge citation databases, Scopus, Web of Science, they characteristically index journal articles. Researchers who publish books are seriously disadvantaged as opposed to their, say, national scientist, fellow scientists. Scientific visibility, therefore, is much more modest in the case of those who write scientific monographs and textbooks. Also, a book qualifies as scientific in Hungary, and I presume here too, understandably, if it is published by a nationally recognized publisher. Smaller departmental publications and privately published material are not required as scientific. Consequently, humanities and social science researchers often publish journal articles when a topic would call for a book-length treatment. So the publish or perish principle does underline the present situation then. After all, the number of publications is of the most important indicators for every procedure, scientific degree, title, promotion, successful fund application. The situation starts to lean towards the publish and perish trap when the number of publications and the prestige of forum of publication become exclusively or too important decisive, and if the present treatment of the humanities and social sciences remain, disregard for the genre of publication, only numbers matter, one monograph counts one publication, and paying no heed to the characteristic of publication and citation specific to the area of science. Besides, if a scientist is outstanding in terms of numbers of publication, this circumstance alone should not automatically secure for him or her, say, promotion. Nor should the circumstance that his or her scientific output satisfied or splendidly exceeds the expected number of national and international number of citations. And those must be independent citations. And it is really to understand from the above, when viewed in the scopus minor, the disproportion of scientific area representation in Hungarian scientific publication output is striking. You can see the results in the figure. You can see the multidisciplinary publications. 0.5% of all publications. And here is beliefs and misbeliefs, directions and misdirections. As we have seen, scientometry started out with statistical measurements of articles published in the natural science journals. The inquiry into the functional mechanism and the laws of scientific research and the convictions as well as beliefs and disbeliefs that developed as a result have their root here. This is how the beliefs and disbeliefs that Wolfgang Glanzel calls the 7 myths of scientometry developed. You can see them. The myth of delayed recognition. Citing yourself is blowing your own trumpet. Collaboration is always a guarantee for success. Citations are measures of scientific quality. Reviews are inflating impact. And non-transit gloria mundi. And the last, don't use averages in bibliometrics. So, the first, the myth of delayed recognition. In this case, myth happens to be a mind-boggling complexity that needs to be clarified. The idea of delayed recognition is used as a defense by those who are hurt by scientometric's short-term 3 to 5 years evaluation and argue for long-term evaluations since, as Glanzel explains, some papers may not be cited or may be poorly cited for a few years, but highly cited many years later. But the argument of delayed recognition is not taken seriously by natural science-based scientometry that counters it by declaring it to be a myth. However, this countering scientometric reaction asserts something which is itself a myth after all. Namely, that delayed recognition does not exist. The fact of the matter is that it does exist and cannot be measured with the citation of the first 3 or 5 years following publications. So to allege that the delayed recognition does not exist, that is a myth, is itself a myth. In several fields of science, recognition takes time, but we can also contemplate the issue from the other end of the equation, the aging of articles. What we find is that the pace of which scientific results age varies from field to field. Time-related citation metrics tells us that social science, applied science, and mathematics contribution are much slower to sink into oblivion than those of experimental sciences as life science are. So in sum, delayed recognition is not a myth. If we do think it is, though, we do short-term evaluations, thereby creating a disadvantaged position for the representatives of those disciplines whose achievements become obsolete at a much slower pace. Their relevant citation should be calculated and evaluated in at least 10-year cycles, and we should somehow put an end to the unfair measuring practice according to which one monograph equals one article. Second, citing yourself is blowing your own trumpet. The myth here is that self-citations are used to manipulate impact, and they are very harmful and must be removed from the statistics. What seems really harmful here, too, is to lump everything together indiscriminately. Those who propound theories, for one, should be treated differently, no matter whether they are humanities and social sciences scholars, researchers of life sciences, or any inanimate natural sciences. Theories can be of the nature of taking shape and being developed in a series of works. Why should not a theoretician be allowed to cite his or her own theory? An earlier stage that she or he proposes to develop further in a new article. Who else could she or he cite when she or he is the only scientist of his or her topic on the scene? Would it make sense to argue that self-quotation is unethical in such cases? Thirdly, collaboration is always a guarantee for success. Quote, multi-authorship and above all international collaboration increases productivity, visibility, and impact. It also facilitates publication in high-impact journals. So, that is difficult, if not possible, to fix. The degree of individual co-authors' contribution to the paper, especially because they are cases of suppressed, fraud, honorific, hyper-authorship, or even mandatory authorship. Glanzer quotes this person on how the number of co-authors is increasingly faster than the number of publications indexed in the Science Citation Index. While the very nature of research project may indeed be called for collaboration, in several fields of science, especially in international projects, putting the community of authors, justly or unjustly, in the light of the mutually supportive citation alliance is a way of generating high numbers of citations, something not available for every discipline. Because in humanities and social sciences research projects, single authors are more typical. It means that the time and energy required by the project is not divided among co-workers. That is to say, the myth of collaboration as a guarantee for success reinforced the practice of qualification and sentenced the solitary researcher to perishment, figuratively and academically speaking. And there is no way for the solitary scientist to be competitive against those whose name circulates with great frequency in research terms and fund applications of such terms. The fast-growing scientometric indicators of a team create an advantageous position for co-workers of whom it is impossible to know if a cited aspect of idea was their contribution or not. When a team publication is cited, it is fair at all that an individual team member should record to his or her own credit the citation that the team as a whole earns. 4. Citations are measures of scientific quality. Let me start with an elementary question. Why cannot we stick to the fact in this case too? The fact of the matter is that if the scientometric indicator of a publication is 0 or is very low, years after its publication, that contribution simply remains unreflected, because that is a fact. But that this unreflectedness would have anything to do with the quality of such an article is an arbitrary assumption, not a fact. On what basis are we entitled to infer that the problem is with its quality? What run counter, to some extent, to the scientometric permissiveness my questions imply are conventions like those expressed by Tibor Brown. Quote, if no reference is made at all to the paper during 5 or 10 years after publication, it is likely that the results involved do not contribute essentially to the contemporary scientific paradigm system of the subject field in question. This is a careful wording, does not contribute essentially to the paradigm system. On the one hand, yes, such a contribution can be utterly insignificant, although there is a good number of subject fields that are vast in themselves, but are so remote from the contemporary social highways of the big issues that most demanded science research travels and are cultivated by so few that even research topics rarely meet, not mentioning the problematic nature of establishing a research paradigm. Still, sudden twists and turns of history can foreground the importance of such research. Relevant examples could be those who study remote languages and cultures of Africa and Asia, suddenly repositioned in these days of the so-called migration crisis. On the other hand, Thomas Kuhn's well-known theory tells us paradigm shifts are built up through contributions that do not conform to the ruling paradigm system. To sum this section up, if impact factor is the order of the day, therefore researchers rush to publish in journals with the highest IF, and thus reaching the targeted readership has become a secondary aspect, albeit the targeted readership would be the valid arbiter of quality. The quantitative approach of evaluating quality can be evaluated to be failure. 5. Reviews are inflating impact. Reviews are always highly cited and do therefore imply citation impacts. They should be removed from bibliographies when used for evaluation. In my country, the myth both does and does not hold. While the empty system does incorporate the researcher's reviews, they are not accepted as scientific works, are discounted as non-scientific. On the other hand, as opposed to the reviews that the scientist produced, the number of those that review his or her own publications do count and are expected to be included in his or her citation profile. The review-related bibliometric myth is another on bleeding with contradictions. Firstly, review and review essay are lumped together as review, whereas a brief review should be distinguished from a review essay, and even Glanzer does not make these distinctions. The latter needs thorough grounding in the reviewed subject in breadth and depth. Consequently, the best representatives of the subject field write the review essay, often developing important own views apropos the review subject, views that do deserve attention and are real contribution even in ideal cases. Second, let us turn to the reviews whose number needs to be qualified when a researcher is being evaluated. Again, only the number. What the quantitative approach of scientometry cannot handle here is the heart and soul of the matter. A review, in most cases, evaluates the quality of a publication. What if the review is negative, harsh, rejective? It still counts as one review? And there is one more circumstance which tips the scales in favor of publish and perish. If a highly esteemed scientist of a discipline honors a publication with writing a review essay about it, she or he goes out of his or her way to do it, brings top-level expertise to it, devotes time and energy to it, it does not count as a publication because it is not classified as scholarly or scientific, certainly not by MT. What happens here is that the most authentic reader, another expert of the same field, is discouraged from performing what should be a basic duty to evaluate the fellow scientist's work, or she or he can regard it as a punishment if she or he does, since the review essay as a genre does not count. And it takes his or her number of publications and citation nowhere. It is because of another myth, if I may add one more myth to Glanzer's 7, that sweeps aside personal quality judgment, even of the most recognized representatives of a given discipline, as subjective. Do we thereby question the expertise of those most recognized professionals and stick obsessively to numbers simply because they are objective? 6. Non-transit gloria mundi, or the myth of everlasting citation impact. Simply put, once highly cited is always highly cited. Glanzer calls the attention of self-complacement of the myth, which warns us that citation impact is not necessarily everlasting. The frame can be transient. His instances are retractions of invalid and fraudulent work. Let us put it this way, not necessarily ethical. In some disciplines, a full professor, for example, can appear as co-author in each and every publication of the research project headed by him or her, even if she did not actually contribute to the publication, under the pretext that the professor names it itself raises the publication to a higher standard. Again, research teams are in much better positions to generate and maintain long-lasting, if not everlasting, high-level citation impact. As we see, teams have ways to manage their citation impact, especially from a leading position or power position. Summary and conclusion. I have no time to speak about my summary and conclusion, so a minute? Okay. So I have a non-conformist and a conformist response to scientific evaluation. So if the firstly, the non-conformist response, at least I call the scientometric evaluation, and its contradiction, it has 4 answers of me. So, if a scientist take quantitative evaluation seriously and relate to the omnipotence of the scientometric indicator in conformity, and would also like to elude the trap of publish and perish, devoted research work is not enough. The following must be taken into consideration too. Firstly, they must primarily aim for publishing journal articles because the quantitative method regards a journal article equal with a monograph. And here come the predator journal with the dangers they represent. These forms of publication were also brought about by the demand created in the world of science, not mentioning their profit-oriented background. Secondly, scientists must choose a satisfactory journal, check its impact factor and its Q ranking in the relevant field of science. If they go about it like this, can we be certain that they will decide on a forum of publication which suits the given subject area best? It is attentive to the special requirements of that area of science, will attract the attention of the best professionals of the field because it is one of the generally recognized forums of publication in that field of science. Thirdly, and it is not enough for the researcher to pay attention to all of these because IF and Q ranking keep changing year to year. The IF and Q ranking of a journal can change easily by the time the article is actually published in. Therefore, scientists must be aware of the larger system picture of IF and Q value changes. And fourthly, to ensure greater visibility for their publications, scientists must make their work available in various repositories and social networking sciences. I'm speaking about ResearchGate, Academia DTU, Mendeley, and so on and so forth, and must keep monitoring their data. The question poses itself here too: how much of scientists' research energy and time should be consumed by managing their former publication like this instead of launching new projects and researching new topics? And the nonconformist response, I have only 3 answers here. Nonconformist relation to scientometric indicators means that highly esteemed scholars or scientists do not yield to the pressure, do not fall into line with the system which ignores their field of science and applies standards that are alien to the basic nature of that field. They keep publishing in journals that are regarded as relevant by the given profession, and they do not bother with impact factors and Q lists, and publishing book remains a priority for them. What it means that while a nonconformist researcher work is regulated by standards that their profession requires and applies, they ignore the scientometric consequences that nonconformist habit entails. They may receive the most relevant recognition from the professionals of the discipline, but they jeopardize their own visibility. Second, the processes detailed above frustrate and discourage nonconformist scientists who will focus on teaching and will not waste extra energy on increasing their scientometric indicators. The nonconformist is one way an academic researcher career can be wrecked. And thirdly, a variation of the nonconformist theme is, if scientists keep the rules and aspire to fulfill quantitative and qualitative prescription alike to produce at least the expected number of publications, to keep up with IF changes and to publish in the best journals. But having high standards in terms of scientometry too slows down research and publication output as it's highly demanding in time. Scientometric indicator will be lower through the loss of research time and energy, thereby underrating such scientists. Remember, quality is numbers for scientometric evaluation. So this is another way of putting it publish or perish will become publish and perish. Thank you very much for your attention.